Hello everyone, and welcome to today's special webcast for Lighthouse 360's clients and friends. I'm Jason Stevenson, the Marketing Manager for Lighthouse 360. Today's presentation will be given by Danny Bobrow and is entitled Master the Art of First Impressions. Daniel A. Danny Bobrow, MBA, is President of AIM Dental Marketing. He is also Executive Director of the Climb for a Cause and Smile Tree Foundations. Mr. Bobrow lectures nationwide and has been published in dozens of profession-related publications. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics from the University of Illinois and MBAs in Finance and Marketing from the University of Chicago and KUL Belgium, respectively. Danny is the author of The State of the Art in Dentistry Marketing, Dentistry Marketing Strategies, Tips, and Secrets, and author of The Art of First Impressions. He is also a certified mediator and arbitrator, charter member of the Speaking and Consulting Network, and founding executive committee member of the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health. I'm joined this morning by Carissa Johnson, who will field your questions during the presentation. We expect today's presentation to run for about 90 minutes, during which you are welcome to submit your questions using the question button on your screen. We will do our best to get all your questions answered, if not during this webcast, then shortly thereafter. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Danny Bobrow.
Thanks very much, Jason. And I want to thank you, Brian, and your entire team at Lighthouse for making this opportunity possible to speak to your clients. And as you and I spoke offline, I'm particularly excited about doing that because people that have committed to utilizing your service clearly understand the importance of communication and have already very much set their stage for success, which is what we're going to talk about in other contexts. But they've done that by ensuring that they're able to regularly and consistently and in a very image-conscious way communicate with your patients. What that means, of course, is that the value to the practice of the patient and the value to the patient of the practice are far higher than they otherwise would be. And that means that any dollars invested in marketing, in other words, getting the phone to ring and getting people into the office, is going to yield that much higher a return. So again, I congratulate you and thank you for this opportunity. What we do want to cover today, I'm going to share that with you now. And the first item is setting the stage for success, which has very much to do with making sure that you have a plan and that your resources and attitudes are congruent with what we're trying to accomplish. Like anything else, a successful team, football team has the right equipment, and we want to make sure you have the right equipment as well as the right mindset and attitudes. We'll then briefly talk about what constitutes effective communication, what are the components that comprise it. That actually leads into a brief discussion about what we term a phenomenon called the visual gap and how to overcome it, as well as what we term the self-fulfilling prophecy trap and how to avoid it. We'll talk a bit about negatively and positively charged words and phrases and why it's so important to carefully choose and use the words that you choose. We'll then speak about and share the emotional underpinning or the foundation or pillars of effective communication, which are establishing rapport, conveying empathy, and exuding enthusiasm to support the rest of the conversation. And then present the art and science of questioning and listening, which all lead to agreement, which is the ultimate goal of any communication. Now, some of the assumptions that we're going to make today, and I'm very comfortable making these because A, you're Lighthouse users, is that your team are enthusiastic about mastering the art of first impressions. And I think that's a safe assumption, although sometimes people are dragged kicking and screaming to presentations to precondition a future employment, or even the practice owner may have been told by their consultant to get on this call. And we're going to spend a little time addressing why we might not be as enthusiastic as I think we should be about this topic. But I'm pretty comfortable we can get through that quickly, and that to a large extent I'm preaching to the choir. Anyway, I'm very confident that you care about delivering the highest level of care to your patients, and that anybody who might answer the phone is passionate about your particular offering, the procedures, protocols, modalities, and philosophy that you offer your patients and the community to live happier and healthier lives. And that's an important assumption, because I can't teach that. I don't think anyone can teach caring or passion. And I think it's a safe assumption that you wouldn't be in this profession if you weren't passionate about helping people. What we can do is basically help you convey that more effectively over the phone.
We have a few poll questions for everyone to answer today to help us better understand who you are. They should be popping up on your screen shortly. First question is, what is your profession? If you would take a few seconds to answer our first question, we'll go over the results shortly.
This is always interesting for me and helpful. We like to know basically who's in attendance, what your roles and responsibilities are, because this is equally important for practice owner and team member alike. The practice owner is really the one who sets the priorities for the practice. And the team member may buy into this concept and the practice owner may not, and then that will lead to a less effective outcome.
So our results from the poll are 13% dentist, 5% hygienist, 63% non-clinical dental team member, 0% physician, and 19% other.
Okay, very good. As I would expect, the predominance of attendees are people that are likely going to be in a position to answer the phone. And I would ask you then to share with your practice owner, if he or she is not on the call today, with what you experienced today, and if you feel it's of value, let them know, because that will obviously need to come from them. It may already have come from them. My guess is that they suggested that you attend this, so we should be in good shape. I think we had a couple of other questions.
Second question is going to be, have you or your team received telephone skills coaching? Go ahead and take a couple seconds to answer this question as well, please.
I'm, of course, always interested in hearing what the experience level of team members is. And I am also going to be really interested to hear what the results from the next poll question are, which those who've had it, what they thought of it.
So the results from this poll were 9% yes, but while in another industry, 32% yes, but it's been a long time, 26% yes recently, and 33% no.
Well, that's really very interesting. And I should share that I've seen the percentage of people who have had coaching in the past steadily increase over time. When I first started doing these webcasts about 4 years ago, the numbers were reversed. And to me, that is a very promising statistic and trend, because it shows that the team and the team members, the team owner and the team members appreciate that this is important. When we first started our work back in 1989, our job was basically getting the phone to ring, and we really didn't have any coaching that we offered. And largely that was because the typical practice owner would say basically to me variations on a theme, which was, you just get the phone to ring and we'll take it from there. And what I think has happened is that people realize that there's a distinct set of skills that are necessary to effectively connect with the callers. So that's very good. So I mean, 2/3 have had some sort of training. Let's hear what their experience with it was now.
So our final question was, if you answered yes to the previous question, what was your experience? 94% said their experience was favorable.
Well, that's good. So for those 6% of you, which is actually very encouraging that it's as low as it is, because in our communications we do come across people that have had a less than positive experience with past coaching. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because it seems like most of the attendees have not experienced that. But often, and you know what, we'll cover that when I actually talk about some concerns that people have in general about telephone skills coaching. So I think we'll hold off on that for the time being. But thank you for that information, Jason, and for all you attendees.
You're welcome.
And this is sort of by way of explaining to people why it's important, why the skills are important. And since Valentine's Day is just around the corner, it's apt that we liken it to your first date. As with most first dates, at least the successful ones, we're on our best behavior because we understand that if we want a second date, we'd better show this person that we care and that we're a catch, as it were. And that's what we want you to think of in terms of communicating and connecting with first-time callers, because it is their first impression of you and by extension the office. And so it really will set the tone for your relationship with them. And by the way, having the technology, and I say that with all modesty, this is a technology. This is a series of techniques that we have developed and distilled over time, working with thousands of offices throughout the country. And so we don't present what we present lightly. It's really based on results and experience. And when you do that, as with any other protocol, when you're not winging it, it makes it a lot more comfortable for the office because you already know what to do. And when you do that, that first connection will instill a perception of quality about your entire practice. Excuse me. And I mentioned branding because branding is essentially a process of distilling into a very memorably simple presentation. And it can be a tagline, it can be a logo, it really is usually both, that tells people very quickly who you are, what you do, why you do it, and for whom. And that way, you're actually reminding yourself of why you exist too. But branding, thought of another way, is just keeping promises. But the branding is the promise that you make. And it really is your best marketing tool. People think of it as sometimes as marketing just being getting the phone to ring, but of course, as my friend and colleague Bill Blatchford often says, getting the phone to ring is one thing. What happens after the phone rings is everything. So let's talk about setting the stage for success. And the first thing we look at is the environment in which you operate. And these images are extremes. And the question is, which describes your practice environment? If it's chaotic and polluted and disorganized, we can imagine how effective you're going to be at connecting with a first-time telephone caller. The goal should be more characterized by the image on the right, which is a serene, comfortable, peaceful setting. And here are some concerns in no particular order that we hear, and of more concern to me sometimes that we don't hear from practice team members about call handling coaching. I'm a perfectionist is often heard, and it's interesting. I'm taking a coaching program now called Strategic Coach, and one of the first distinctions that they've taught us is that we've been raised to believe that perfectionism is a virtue, and really it isn't, because perfectionism leads to procrastination. People who consider themselves perfectionists, and I count myself among those, by the way, have a hard time getting started because they want everything to be just right before they, in this case, take a phone call. And the problem with that mindset is that true learning only begins when we begin to practice. And in fact, this webcast series that we offer is called Practice Perfection for that very reason. We strive for practice perfection, but we have to practice perfection to attain it. People have issues about personality differences, as though somehow what they're being asked to do on the phone is not authentically them. We'll talk about that briefly. For those of you that were not, and this is the more seasoned employees among you who were not hired to do this, I can understand that. All I would suggest is that we live in a dynamic world. and that the most successful people not only accept but embrace change, that it's an exciting part of life. And I can only assume that when the practice does better, everybody benefits, and that's obviously based on the compensation arrangement. And by the way, I want to say that I'm not making the assumption that anyone on this call is wholly ineffective at converting callers into appointments. I'm sure that they are, that you're scheduling appointments on a regular basis. What I suggest is that improving it just a few percentage points can greatly enhance the success of the practice. And I'm also making the, I think, valid point, which is that a first-time telephone caller really requires a different set of skills than someone with whom you already have a relationship. As far as being too busy or feeling it's not necessary, I'm assuming that you're busy. And that's why setting the stage for success and providing you with these skills is all about making things more efficient and more effective and productive for you. And that's what this is really all about. We'll talk about the sometimes mindset that people present with, that these type of callers that are asking about price and insurance are somehow low quality. And the general concern and frustration sometimes we hear is that our patients love us once they meet us. And the only point that I am making is that they've already met you. They've met you on the phone. And so we just want to make that meeting as positive as when they meet you face to face. Let's talk a little bit more about reading off a script, because this is often raised as a concern for some people. And depending on your taste and your age, these phrases will resonate with you. These are basically all taken from some of the most famous and loved movies of our era, of our time. And the ironic thing I think about them is that these are all scripts. Actors basically get what they call off book. They memorize their lines so that they can then infuse the lines with their feeling and their persona. Now, interesting thing to make clear is that our jobs are actually easier because we're not actors. If you think about the more versatile actors among us, they don't exude their personality. They actually adopt and exude a persona. And so they can decide that they are someone and convince themselves, which then makes them convincing to the audience. All we want to do is get you comfortable with certain scripts so that you can then infuse them with your personality. And we are not in any way suggesting that you read a rote script line by line from beginning to end of call. In fact, really, if you prefer, and I think this is more accurate, think about it more as a checklist or a roadmap. Really, the only scripting that we recommend is at the introduction, because as you'll see, the taffy introduction, as we call it, taffy short for the art of first impressions, gives you a wonderful jumping off point. Because the introduction of the call, we talk about the first impressions, art of first impressions. The call is their first impression with you. The beginning of the call is really their first impression of the call. And other important elements of setting the stage for success are the type of equipment in place, be they your telephone system, cordless headsets, which we will talk about more because I strongly advise you use them if you're not. And then the services, whether you have an outgoing message or an answering service, and whether you have an on-hold message or people are hearing dead air or out-of-tune music or a scratchy radio station. And then,
hey, Danny, we're getting some requests for you to speak up a little louder. Could you do that, please?
Sure. I rarely get that request. That's interesting. Usually I'm told to tone it down a bit. Is that any better?
It sounds louder to me, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. You know, as I was saying, any effective team or process is a series of systems that work in concert. And what that means in our context is what your outgoing message says, knowing what it says, not just having it, and making sure it works too, and making sure it references your website. We'll talk more about that soon, because we want to impress people and provide them with convenience and service even when we're not able to directly interact with them. So it's very important that every team member know, even the ones that don't answer the phones, because these questions can be asked face-to-face too. You know, I was on your website and I saw a very interesting piece about implant-supported dentures. Can you tell me more about that? Or a special offer that you're running? Headsets, in a word, equal freedom. And we have talked to people, and this is something that we strongly encourage, because if it's Grand Central Station at your front desk and you're trying to connect with a first-time telephone caller while juggling 4 other tasks and there's background noise, that's an unreasonable challenge. And what I would ask anyone who has used them and maybe had less than positive experience, because I hear about people having concerns about how it messes up their hair, and that's not a concern that I've had for many years, but in general, or the sound quality isn't there. There's such a wide variety, and they're pictured here. You can have one on your ear. I heard for the first time last week from a team that they felt that they got an ear infection from it. And that was a new one on me, and I'm not sure why that would happen, because these really don't penetrate the ear. They should rest outside of it. But I guess swabbing it down once in a while wouldn't hurt. But it's really freedom, because now you can get to a quiet area. And you owe that to the caller and, frankly, to yourself, to be able to connect with them, that you have a quiet, serene environment. Now, in the context of first impressions, they don't always wait. People will call when it's convenient for them. That's why it's very important that your outgoing message, or what we call voicemail, has certain characteristics. And one of which is that it should never ring more than 4 times before it's answered. Now, most more sophisticated equipment out there allows you to set the number of rings. And if you think about it, if your office is closed anyway, there's really no reason for the caller to have to wait for the phone to pick up for the outgoing message. And that's really in your interest, because people value convenience. Some people may have just had to work up the courage to call a dental office, and all they need is an excuse to hang up. And the other thing is, with today's cellular technology, they could be going through a bad cell. So you want to make it really easy to make the connection as easily as possible for the caller. And that means, convenience means also less is more in marketing and in communications. Somewhere many years ago, the first outgoing message had a recording that included office hours. It was probably a pizzeria or a dry cleaner, because to them I could see why they would do it. But if you think about it, most dental offices really never see a patient until before the telephone appointment is made over the telephone. So hours and other such filler are really unnecessary and take away from the effectiveness. And if anything, they may be calling to find out what your hours are, so that's one less reason for them to call back or leave a message. And keep it short. I've actually been listening to our clients' messages, and they're closer to 25 and 26 seconds now. You just get in and you get out. Or if you have a longer message, I have some clients that have group practices, and they do need to share some information about how to get a hold of a given doctor. So they have to have it go long. For those, though, for the repeat callers who already know that and don't need to hear it, you really ought to say, after you've confirmed that your system will allow this, to bypass the remainder of this message, please press 0, or please press pound. And remember, too, that you are actually communicating with someone. You're talking to a machine when you record it, but that machine is talking to a person. So be enthusiastic. Maybe select the person on your team that gives the best phone, so to speak, and let him or her do the recording. Now, if you have an answering service, that concerns me. Not that they're inherently bad, but I have had a difficult time finding one that is consistently good. So if you do have an answering service, I encourage you to check it often. I encourage you to call yourself, be placed on hold, and call after hours to make sure that your outgoing message is working as well. But sometimes the answering services start out good, and then because they get busy or there's a change of personnel, they deteriorate. So you want to make sure that they get and practice your protocol. I called a practice in New Jersey. This is going on a year ago now, but it's pretty poignant. Tried to reach the doctor, and I was given the usual third degree. Your name, date of birth. I mean, I'm a consultant, so, and for all I know, this is what they were asked to do, but I said, well, I'm a consultant and I'm calling to speak with the doctor. She said, well, you'll have to call back. And I said, well, I'm actually a consultant that in part evaluates how their telephone is being handled. And she hung up on me. So just a friendly bit of advice. Now, when we talk about on-hold message, which is what callers hear when placed on hold, some people say, well, I don't like to be placed on hold. And I don't really like it either, but that's usually because of what happens when I'm placed on hold. If it's a pleasant experience and I'm not asked to hold too briefly, I don't mind it at all. In fact, sometimes it's entertaining and educational. But the thing to be aware of is that some practices say they never place callers on hold. If that's the case, then they may have other issues, overstaffed, not busy enough, that sort of thing, and that's where marketing would come in, I think, to change that. I think the practice should be operating at a level where occasionally a caller is placed on hold, and I'll make a heretical statement for some of you. It'll be perceived that way soon, which is that when it's a new patient caller, in almost every case, you should place them on hold. But some of the virtues of an on-hold message that's properly produced and frequently updated is that it actually lessens perceived hold time. I've tested this. I'll place someone on hold for 60 seconds and ask them how long they thought they were on hold without asking them before. I don't tell them that's what I'm going to do. And they typically say half the time, 30 seconds. And you can try this yourself. And as I mentioned, it educates and even entertains the caller. You do want to keep it current. We offer this service. It's extremely easy to keep updated frequently. In the past, offices would have the same on-hold message. I called an office. This is also going on 6 months ago now. And they said, so that would have been late 2012, and their message was saying 2008 marks 20 years serving the Westchester community. So clearly that doesn't reflect as positively as it might. It's very easy to keep it updated, and you should keep it updated because it demonstrates that you're not only a caring professional, but that you're an engaged, vibrant member of the community, because you don't need to speak only about dental-related elements. If you're committed to philanthropy, or you have a new procedure, or you've adopted a baseball team, or whatever you think is interesting. You have a new recipe that's heart healthy, or helps reduce oral inflammation. Talk about it, or tell them how to find it more about it on your website. Basically, it's a great tool to build a professional image, and as we'll talk about soon, prepare to speak with that all-important person, namely your newest patient, because we want you to give that person your undivided attention, and it often requires reprioritizing. I want to introduce, because repetition is the key to learning, and because this is so important, and I mentioned earlier, this is the result of years of research and experience, what I call the Taffy introduction. And here it goes. The first thing we ask and encourage all of you to answer, and you may be doing this very closely now anyway, is the greeting, which is thank you for calling your practice name, where your tagline. If you don't have a tagline, I hope you'll get one. This is your name, how may I help you? Then the person asks a question or makes a statement, and it could be how much does a crown cost, where are you located, are you in my insurance plan, I'd like a second opinion, what is the meaning of life? In other words, I really don't care what question they ask. The answer is always should be, I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask who I'm speaking with? Or with whom am I speaking? And you'll see why we do that soon, if it's not already apparent. The next question we ask is, are you in any discomfort presently? Then we ask, who may we thank for referring you to us? And then, unless you really have nothing going on at that particular moment, we encourage you to say, would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk and give you my undivided attention? That buys time, and that's why I have the Chinese takeaway, at least as they call it on the East Coast. I'm Central Time. We call it takeaway or carry out, but we call it takeout or carry out. But this is a huge takeaway, and we'll revisit it frequently because of that. If you get nothing else from today's time together, I hope you'll get this, because this will set the tone for the rest of the call, make calls much easier for you, and I'll explain more about why that is the case soon. So when we're talking about what comprises effective communication, there was a study done in UCLA several years ago by a professor named Albert Mehrabian, and he studied what comprises effective communication, and his studies determined that there are three: verbal, vocal, and visual. Verbal is the words we use. Vocal is the way we use the words that we choose. It's the tone, resonance, and inflection of the voice. And the visual is the body language. It's the expression and use of the face and hands. And these were the results. Fully more than half of effective communication is accounted for by the visual component. So if you think about it, when you're on the phone, this goes a long way explaining why some of us have a challenge connecting with people. We're basically dealing with less than half a deck. And that's why we have to do what we call minimize the visual gap. Accentuate what we've got. Accentuate and maximize the value and the effectiveness of the verbal and vocal components. Why? Well, you might conclude that it's because callers cannot see you. And that's true to an extent. But remember that people have a mind's eye. And that's why we often coach our team members to have good posture, to smile, sometimes even have a mirror in front of the phone, because that image gets conveyed. My friend Bill Blatchford often relates a story. He's old enough, great shape, so I'm not, he's a great example of fitness at I think he's going on 71 years old. But he's old enough to have grown up when they had the crank telephones. And his mother at 4 o'clock would make herself up to prepare to talk to her sister Helen. And Bill and his siblings would laugh and say, "Mom, Aunt Helen can't see you on the phone." And she would say, "Oh, yes, she can." So I think that's an important lesson to keep in mind. We talked briefly about the self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, actually, we haven't. I introduced that we would. And what this posits is that when we label something or someone as undesirable, the quality of our communication inevitably deteriorates. It changes for the worse. And that's why it's really important to think about what our thoughts and our little inner voice is telling us about somebody on the other line, because they will pick up on it. And that's why Bill Rossi has mentioned that there's no difference between the value or the type of person as a function of why they called you. If they're responding to a direct mail solicitation, or they've been on your website, or they were referred by your best patient, they're from the same community. And the problem is that sometimes we don't understand how to connect with that person. They're just, because we're at a different point in the relationship, it's basically our first date. And the problem too is that we may think back and say, well, that one was a really tough call. Well, first of all, it may have been them, it may have been you, or they may have been a sincerely difficult call. We like to avoid conflict and confrontation and negativity as human beings. And so sometimes we focus on the 5% negative instead of the 95% positive, which is, again, Bill says we should really set policy based on the rule and not the exception. The other thing to realize is that, I don't know about you, but when I am calling or shopping for something I don't know much about, usually the first question I ask is, well, how much does it cost? And that's really not because I'm looking for the lowest price item or that cost is even the most important thing to me. Value, dependability, trust, those are important. I just don't really choose to articulate that at the beginning. So this really is kind of a test. People are really saying how much does a crown cost, but they're really listening for the empathy, rapport, and enthusiasm. This is from my friend Bill Rossi of Edina. I like to spend a minute or two on what I call the acid test for practice growth, and that just asks you to consider the situation where you've got two phones. They both ring at the same time. On line one is Mary, and Mary wants to know how much a crown costs. She just got a direct mailer from you. On the other line is Bill. Bill's calling because his wife, his future wife, insisted that he call because his teeth need to be made right for that special day, for the great photographs. So he's calling to come in for a full mouth reconstruction. Most people reflexively would prefer to talk to Bill. And the reason is that Bill's an easy sale. Basically, you're just taking an order. It's like, when can you come in? But the thing to understand and to recognize is that they're both marketing calls. Bill is simply the result of all your effective marketing. You obviously treated his wife well, and so she referred him very confidently to you, and he chose the time to call, so he's motivated. If you get more excited about talking to Mary, which I hope you will, Mary is going to be, in terms of the relationship of the practice only, will be a Bill in the future. And that's because you will communicate with that caller and have a very good first date, establish rapport, convey empathy, exude enthusiasm, and connect with that caller. And then the results of your internal marketing that Lighthouse, in large part, delivers to you will let that person become very comfortable and confident and then refer her husband to you for work or just continue to accept work. And just briefly, I know we didn't say there'd be any math, so let's just talk briefly about this. Marketing is an investment, and it's a good investment in the practice as long as you have all the links in the chain in place, the success chain. The easy cost of marketing to measure is how much it costs to generate a telephone call. And that's really easily done. Let's say you're investing $1,000 in marketing and that investment yielded 10 phone calls. All you do is divide 10 phone calls into $1,000, then you get $100. That's what the call costs. So you could, I think it would be short-sighted, but you could say, well, if we don't connect with that caller, then we've wasted $100. You certainly have, but there's another phenomenon that economists call opportunity cost, and that is the lost future revenue and production that you would have realized had you connected effectively with that caller. And there has been research done, again, by my friend Bill Rossi with the University of Minnesota to calculate the average lifetime value of a patient. And this was done over 10 years ago, and it was $4,800. And that's average. Your lifetime value for your patient is probably higher. And again, I say that simply knowing that you're a Lighthouse client. We know for a fact that Lighthouse clients will have a longer lifetime and more production simply because people are showing up and keeping their appointments more regularly. And so you can up that by whatever percentage you like. But that's why, even if you're doing a good job at connecting with callers now, if you do a little better job, your practice grows to the tune of, conservatively, $5,000 per additional appointment. Now, negatively and positively charged words are, even though that's only 7%, the emotional effect of those words can be very, very important indeed in your ability to communicate with somebody, because they hit on a subconscious level quite often. And this is one way to illustrate it, is just to ask you which seminar you'd rather attend. Sexual harassment in the workplace and dealing with racism, or men and women as allies and friends and celebrating pluralism. Now, a number of you might already know, these are two different titles for the same seminar, the same workshop. It's all in the words that we chose to present them. For many people, the words sexual, harassment, racism, unfortunately workplace for some, are negatively charged. But allies, friends, celebrating pluralism, they make you feel better. And that's what's important, because that opens a person's mind to actually hearing what you have to say and being open to communication. They may not even realize the effect that these are having on them, but they are having an effect, and the effect is negative when you use the negative words. And we want to suggest just a few really powerful words to incorporate into your communication, and those are proud, conservative, and concerned. Now, pride is very important. It shows a sense of passion and that you actually are loyal. And that's contagious. We'll talk about that in the context of enthusiasm soon. But it conveys passion for your practice, for your office. And one thing that I want to, an additional suggestion is that You may be nodding in agreement about all of this, but the key to learning this is to exercise and to practice. And it's kind of fun anyway. I would ask you to share with your team and your practice owner, your doctor, what is it that you're proud about to be a part of your practice? This will help with your branding and maybe even development of an effective tagline. What's special about you? Why are you proud to be there? And when it comes to healthcare, I don't care what your political bent is. Conservative is a very good word to use because nobody wants their doctor playing fast and loose with their health or their finances for that matter. So every opportunity you have to suggest that your philosophy is to take the conservative approach, that will always resonate with the caller. And again, I would ask you as an exercise to verbalize, discuss amongst yourselves how you demonstrate your conservative approach, and then translate that into some little sound bites that you can incorporate into your communication. And we'll talk more about that when we discuss translating attributes into benefits. Third word is concern. And as you all know, that simply means that you care. And when you use it as a health professional, it's really powerful. Another exercise for you all is to just complete the following sentence. We show our concern for our patients by... And here are a few, you may not call them negatively charged. I mean, some of them are, but I think they're at best neutral. And we want to take every opportunity to convert negative or neutral to positive. So instead of appointment, why don't you consider using the word visit? Or even some of our people say meet and greet as a first meeting. Instead of problem, how about challenge or opportunity? Instead of cost, try today's amount. And instead of down payment or monthly payment, the initial or monthly amount. And let's try to extract the word extraction from our vocabulary and replace it with remove, or replace, or restore, removal. Some more, let's use most economical, or it's the best value, instead of the cheap or the cheapest. And here's a good one. Here's a good series to replace. Approval, approve, endorse, authorize. Can I get your John Hancock over here? A little humor never hurts either. Instead of sign here. And here's an exercise you can do within or outside of the office, is just heighten your awareness by seeing, listening, and how others' use of their words makes you feel. And ask yourself, God, if he had said, you know, you'll feel it. You'll have an emotional reaction before you actually process what happened. So be on the lookout for what you feel in your gut when people use certain words, and ask yourself how maybe it would have been different had they chosen different words. Okay, it's time to play Guess the Charge. I always forget that music and it scares the bejesus out of me. These are just some simple ones. Obviously, we're not interacting here, but other exercises for you is this positive or negative? The office can't see you until next Tuesday. I can help you with that. You must submit your own insurance forms. We're delighted you've chosen to call us. You get the picture, right? We don't do it that way. In other words, is the attitude of the office, either knowingly or subconsciously, it's my way or the highway, or as Nordstrom says, yes, we can. And I think you all know what I hope it is. Let's talk about empathy, rapport, and enthusiasm a little bit more specifically now, because as I'd mentioned, these are the emotional underpinning. These are the foundations upon which effective communication is built. So let's start with some definitions. Empathy is simply the capability to understand another's feelings. It's to walk a mile in their moccasins, to feel with them. And rapport is just a relation marked by harmony and conformity, connecting with people. And this, doing so are so important because, I bet you can finish this for me, people don't care how much you know. That's right, until they know how much you care. And while we're on memorable phrases, here's one that I love. And this gets to what I spoke about before, how people don't even process what you've said to them. People may not remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Okay. Now, for those of you who may be driving, there's a picture here under enthusiasm of a very enthusiastic, effusive, vivacious television personality, and the caption reads, "You are at a 10. We need you at about a 7." And I suppose we all know people like this, but I would respectfully suggest that when it's on the telephone, most of us are at a 7, and we need to be at a 10. Notwithstanding that people were saying they couldn't hear me, it's funny, in my office, when Virginia, my life and business partner, my office is actually in my home, and she can hear me when I'm on the phone. But when I'm across the dinner table, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but we're in the same room, she can't hear me. She goes, "Danny, would you use your phone voice, please? Because I can't hear what you're saying." So I just do it naturally. And it really is important that we enunciate. Talking on the phone is not the same as talking face to face. There's a very simple but highly powerful way to connect with a caller, and that is to get the caller's name and early and use it often. And that's why I'm excerpting from our Taffy introduction the following. I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask who I'm speaking with? This is so powerful because some of you may be too young to know the name Dale Carnegie, but he wrote a book published first in 1935 called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And what he said, among other things in there, is that a person's name is the sweetest sound that they will ever hear. And that is so important. And I'm getting a message that my volume seems to have dropped again. I'm sorry, folks. This is a new phenomenon for me. And I am speaking rather loudly. But let's talk a little bit more about how you can connect with people simply by getting their name. Think about people for whom English is not their first language, or who have a speech impediment, or are elderly. Most of these people are only too accustomed to not being asked their name because people don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be uncomfortable with it. I can promise you that it's time very well spent to slow down, and if you don't hear a name, even after you ask for it, the first lesson here is ask for the name, please, early in the conversation, because then that person is real for you, and then they're more likely to listen to and care about what you have to say. But take a moment, and if you can't get the name, say, I apologize, there must be a bad connection. I really want to make sure I have the correct spelling and pronunciation of your name. Could you please spell it for me? You will make a friend for life, especially a person who's gone through their life with people calling them buddy and pal or miss just because they have a challenging name to pronounce. I think it's fun. I'm at a point now where somebody tells me their name and I can usually spell it and pronounce it, and believe me, that earns points with somebody. It does with me, right, Jason?
Yeah, definitely.
We had a little joke about the pronunciation of my last name at the beginning of today's call. Sometimes people get it wrong. Now, effective communication really has to do with translating attributes into benefits. So another little mnemonic for you is simply A to B. When you're communicating an attribute of your office, which is just a physical characteristic, if you stop there, you've missed an opportunity to demonstrate the value and why this person should care about you and your practice. So here are a few examples, and a great exercise for you and your team to practice is to identify an attribute of your office. I'm going to go through a few here, but yours could be early or evening hours, weekend hours, free parking, complimentary warm towels, coffee, foot massage. I don't know. Some of our office bake cookies, which I think is a great idea, especially if they're laden with sugar, right? No, we would recommend xylitol, actually. But we offer a complimentary smile analysis. That's an attribute. The translation, which is done via what we call a word bridge, such as that means, would be we offer a complimentary smile analysis. That means you can visit our office without cost or obligation to choose for yourself how we can help you receive the care you want and deserve. See, now the person, we can't make the assumption the person knows why this would be a benefit to them. And by the way, during that interaction, you listen for the response because that may not matter to them. If it doesn't, then you're not ready to make the appointment because you haven't received the buying signal or touched upon what we call a hot button. Here's another one. We offer oral DNA testing. That means simply by testing your saliva, we can identify bacteria that could be responsible for your oral health and prescribe treatment to help improve your overall health. Advanced hygiene assessment. That means we can help you achieve your highest possible level of oral health through our, put your program name here if you have one, dental clearance, magic wand, whatever. Talk a little bit about oral systemic care. The fact that we offer an oral systemic philosophy of patient care means we're not only going to save you money by focusing on prevention and home care, we might even save your life. Talk a little bit about the importance of having a plan. The fact is that you can probably predict over 95% of the type of calls that you're going to get as a dental office. People aren't going to be calling to ask you about recipes or how to fix their stove or for snow tires, obviously. And when you can predict what they're going to ask, that makes it really simple for you to prepare how to respond. And then that reduces the stress and makes you much more effective. And I know that for some of you, the word selling can be a negatively charged word. So I hasten to submit my definitions of selling, which are simply empowering people to make an informed decision and communication with a purpose. I actually stole that one, second one from Fred Joyle of 800 Dentists. What we want to do is connect with callers. And the way you do that is by finding common ground. They're calling from you, either they're in your neighborhood or they're planning to move to your neighborhood or they just have arrived in your neighborhood. And that means there's numerous opportunities to connect with them. And I like to think of the communications as arrows in your communication quiver. And if you have a commitment to philanthropy or if they're new to the area or you're very passionate about your oral systemic health protocols, share some of those or ask what's important. We'll certainly get into that when we talk about the science, art and science of questioning. In general, think about the attributes of your practice and translate those into benefits and get excited about it because as Henry Ford said, nobody ever bought anything without an exchange of enthusiasm. So it's not only saying it, remember, it's the verbal and the vocal. It's what you say and how you say it. Now we're ready to talk about the art and science of questioning and listening. Connecting with callers simply requires that we ask questions because whoever asks the questions controls the call. And if you're like me, you like to be in control of the clicker. And by the way, let me also qualify. So for some people, they don't like the word control. By control, we do not mean manipulate. As professionals, you really owe it to the caller to gain control of the call because they really don't know what's important or what to ask. There are certain things that are important to them, but until you have a chance to present them with their options, they really are somewhat flying blind. And if you don't like the word control, you can replace it with guide. Whoever asks the questions will guide the call. And there are two general types of questions, close-ended or closed probes and open-ended or open probes. And it's very important to understand the difference because that will dictate how and when to use them. Closed probes or closed-ended questions are simply those that require a very short or limited answer, such as yes, no, up, down, north, east, west, south. And open-ended questions are ones that require someone to elaborate. You can think of it as, I never thought of this, but pretty simple. Closed-ended are multiple choice questions and open-ended are essay questions. And just to help you remember the order, think about a closed sandwich, closed, open, closed. You begin with closed probes, you continue with open probes, and then you end your conversation with a closed probe. And the oil can reminds me to remind you that questions are really the lubricant of effective communication. They are what drive the exchange of important information. So let's revisit our taffy introduction. Thank you for calling Practice Name, where we tagline, this is your name, how may I help you? They ask a question. The answer is, I can help you with that. My name is. Next is a closed probe. With whom am I speaking? Now, we don't just ask this because we want the person's name. Well, actually, that is the main reason for this one. But again, the reason that we want the name is so that we can use it. All right? We want to prepare for an exchange of their name. The next question is, are you in any discomfort presently? Now, the reason we ask that question, and this is an important thing to realize, is that when we ask questions, we actually have an opportunity not simply to receive information, we're also in a position to impart information. And in this case, the reason that we have you ask this question, even if you're pretty confident that they're not in pain, is to show that you care. And that's a very important foot to get off on in a relationship, isn't it? And so a lot of people will say, well, we're asking that question because we want to know what kind of appointment to schedule for them and how urgent it is. That's absolutely true. But equally important, in my opinion, is the opportunity to show that you care about them. Likewise with this, who may we thank for referring you? People will say, and it's true, we want to know that so that we can thank the person, or we want to track how effective our marketing is. Although, if you work with us, our tracking programs are pretty airtight. You don't need to manually or anecdotally track results. But the information that we're imparting here is a sense of confidence that you must have been referred by one of our happy patients. So we're exuding confidence here. And then this question, which prepares you to buy time, to prepare, reprioritize, is would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk and give you my undivided attention? Now note what's happened here too. Who's getting into the habit of answering the questions? It's not you, it's them. So you very subtly, but very importantly, gained control of the call by asking some very innocuous questions. I actually just inserted this slide this morning. People that are coached by us receive, they subscribe, they get a members-only access to our website, and they also receive a monthly subscription to a monthly newsletter called Above the Call. And every month they get a call of the month, which is a recording that's genericized. We change the names or remove the names, and then share them and ask our client to evaluate the call. And that before they read my evaluation, but I provide them with both. And then we transcribe it and send it. And so this is part of a evaluation from this month's call of the month, actually. The only thing I really want to draw to your attention to is that this is what happened in the call. Excuse me. The team member answered the phone with a nice greeting and use of a tagline. Then the caller asked the question. The team member answered. The caller asked. Team member answered. Asked, answered, asked, answered, asked, answered. Caller at the end, thank you very much. That's all I need to know. Okay, well, thanks. It's pretty clear that the caller was in control, and consequently, the team member never really had a chance to schedule the appointment. Now, we've done the closed probes. Back to the art and the technology, the closed, open, closed paradigm. Once you've got permission, only then can you proceed to the open-ended questions. And you receive permission both explicitly and implicitly. Your explicit permission would be just to ask. A crown is certainly one way to achieve great results. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions to be sure we're giving you the right information, the information that you need to make the right choice? I emphasize you just so we're showing you how much we're focused on them and their needs. But the likelihood of them saying yes to this is going to be greatly enhanced if you've established rapport, conveyed empathy, and exuded enthusiasm during the call. And that's where the taffy introduction comes in so importantly. And here are some examples of some open-ended questions. What is it about your smile you'd like to improve? Can you share what's kept you from addressing this until now? See, understanding why now is very important. People that call and ask you if you're in their insurance plan, trust me, they've got better things to do than just routinely decide all of a sudden, well, I want to see if this practice is in my plan. They're calling because they have a dental need. With almost without exception. Now, some of you are saying, no, I once had someone who just got the book or changed employers. That may be true. I wonder if you could even think of a single example. But remember, we set policy on the rule, not the exception. Now, once you've identified the want by listening very closely, we'll talk about listening in a minute, to the responses to the open-ended questions, you should have all the information you need at that point to close. And that means you move to the third component of the paradigm, which is the closed probes. Examples of which that would be appropriate at this point are these. Will mornings or evenings be better for your first visit? What form of payment do you want to use? Can we help you process paperwork? And while we're on questions, here's a question that we hope you can answer. This is frequently the case. Somebody will call an office and say, I'm driving east on 35th Street. Are you north or south of it? Or east, or where are you? The call handler is often befuddled by that question. And it's kind of funny, but I think sometimes it's because people travel a great distance to where they work and they don't really know the community that they're working in. I think more appropriately or more telling is I think the one of the negative side effects of all this mobile technology like GPSs. I moved to an area fairly recently, a new area, and I was driving to a Staples, and I called them and asked if they were north, if I needed to continue to go north on 31. They said, I have no idea, hold on. They transferred to someone. I asked them, I have no idea, hold on, please. 3 people didn't know what direction north was or where they were. Okay, so this is important. If you have public transportation in your area, if there are landmarks, this is a really important way to show that you care and that you're professional and that you're interested in helping the caller. It goes a long way. It helps them find you too. Now, effective listening is one of my favorite topics. A lot of people think that the best salespeople are good talkers. And I respectfully differ. I think the best salespeople are great listeners. Because without listening, you really cannot know what's important to the prospective patient. And so when listening to your patients or anybody, I want you to be sure to listen fully and completely. And this goes back to setting the stage for success. It's hard to listen fully and completely when there's a lot of distraction and noise around. Also, don't view listening as waiting until you get your chance to talk next. I sometimes think that's what people think listening is. It's just waiting to talk. So really try to concentrate on what the patient is saying and not on what you're planning to say. Because it may not be a match for what they're saying. Understand the facts about what their situation is. And the only way you can do this is by asking questions and allowing them to elaborate. And then once you've done that, you have permission to explore their dissatisfaction with where they are now and have an opportunity to share with them how you can transform their situation for the better. So by way of connecting with callers, the key is to first sell. Remember, communication with a purpose, empowering people to make an informed decision. That is what I mean by selling. Use a really strong greeting, convey empathy, establish rapport, exude enthusiasm, avoid that self-fulfilling prophecy, use positive, not negative words. Remember the closed, open, closed paradigm. All the while translating attributes to benefits. Listen for the wants. That is the buying signals. And only then qualify. In other words, that is the time when you collect and confirm information and details. Someone smarter than me once said, if we're going to work together, we'll work out the details. If we're not going to work together, the details don't matter anyway. So we're on the home stretch, folks. Here's just some verbiage. And in our coaching with our clients, we will address specific challenges and situations based on what we hear taking place in the calls. And we've got some great ways to deal with fees and to address that question because it's a reasonable question. Again, no matter what they're asking, there's always a way to translate the attribute into a benefit. And that's why we make it easy for you to experience for yourself if we're the practice for you by. And we hope that a prospective patient need not make a financial commitment for their first visit, because then they have really no reason to insist on knowing the price before they come in, for instance. And let them know that you're sensitive to their situation. All financial considerations are shared in advance of any treatment, because we never let affordability get between you and the care you want and deserve. Our financial coordinator's responsibility is to help you receive the care you want in a way that works for you. Now, if people insist on knowing the price, you can offer them a range, or, and this is a little advanced, we call it the triad close, where you just sort of make them sorry they asked. So if somebody wants to know the price of a crown, you say, well, we do a wonderful job here with crowns. Do you have a few moments so I could tell you a little bit about them? And then you proceed to explain that you have different types of crowns and they have different costs, investments, and some of them are more convenient, some of them are more durable. It depends on what your needs are. And then the third option is always, that's why we make it easy for you to find out if we're the practice for you, by inviting you in for a complimentary meet and greet. That's when the doctor, who's the professional, can examine you and provide you with options and feedback to make an informed choice. So again, final review. Thank you for calling. This is how we do it. Thank you for calling ADM, where we take aim with your marketing. This is Danny. How may I help you? How much is your marketing? What's the meaning of life? I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask who I'm speaking with? Then I get the name. We don't typically ask if they're in any discomfort. I mean, there are practice pain points, but we'll dispense with that, but you shouldn't. So the next thing I ask is, who may we thank for referring you? Again, I want to show confidence that they must have been referred by a happy client. And then indeed, if I am busy, which I usually am, I ask, would you mind if I place you on hold for just a moment so I can get to my desk and give you my undivided attention? And then they get to hear our on-hold message. So again, final review. The keys to call control are to make that taffy introduction part of your marrow. Just incorporate it and use it, because it'll help you establish rapport, convey empathy, exude enthusiasm, ask questions in the right way at the right time, engage in active listening, and connect with the callers.
Thanks, Danny. That was great. Before we get to a couple questions that our listeners have asked, I'd like to ask you to share with us some details about your service and the offers you've agreed to extend to the Lighthouse 360 client and friends today.
I'd be delighted to. As you know, we offer coaching, and that coaching can take various forms. We have a packet called The Art of First Impressions, which is a 2-CD set. It was actually developed in conjunction with Dr. Bill Blatchford, who some of you may know. And the first disc is us just having a dialogue, sharing many of the distinctions that I shared with you today. Largely, the second disc is real-life recordings. We have 14 different scenarios. Not scenarios, they're real-life conversations that we recorded between prospective patients and dental team members. We genericize them, of course. And then we share those, our evaluation, but we ask you to evaluate first. There's a 24-page workbook that comes with the CDs. You also get subscribed to the Above the Call newsletter and 1 year of access to the members-only section of the Practice Perfection website. To learn more about this, you can go to practiceperfection.com/taffy. And we're offering the program for half the normal price. It's normally $4.95. And that is for attendees of this webcast only. And you'll need to enter in TAFI 50. That is case sensitive, correct, Carissa? I believe it is.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then we also are offering a $100 savings on the on-hold message subscription. And we hope you will take advantage of that also, as I also hope I was able to demonstrate. It is an integral part of effective and professional communications. And you want to control every touch point with a current or prospective patient. And that's why we are offering this inducement for you to try it on for size. And I think that does it.
All right, Danny, we have a couple questions that were asked during the webcast today. First question is, how do you respond to callers asking for fees for hygiene or other dental procedures? And do you give them fees over the phone?
Right, great question. And we do delve into this because this is an area that is obviously a challenge for many call handlers. The first thing is, if you simply incorporate the taffy introduction into every single call, Because, you know, some people fall into the trap of someone says, well, how much does a crown cost? You feel that you'd be discourteous somehow, or that you're obligated to immediately answer that question. And if you remember, my response is, I can help you with that. My name is Danny. May I ask who I'm speaking with? You're going to get to their question, but people are only too happy to give you their name. And what you're doing when you go through the introduction is that you're establishing rapport, conveying empathy, and exuding enthusiasm. That tends to diminish the importance of that question. So often they won't ask it. They won't insist on it being asked. But if they do ask, it's simply a matter of explaining how you have different services. And you can do the triad close. You can say, oh, our hygienist is the best. Her name is Mary. She's been here for 20 years. She takes care of me, and I wouldn't go anywhere else. And I'm not the expert on that, but I do know that there are different kinds of hygiene. And it depends on what your wants and needs are, frankly, prospective caller. Do you have a moment for me to talk to you about that? If you want to talk to them about it. But the other thing is just say, we know there's a range and it depends. That's why we make it easy for you to come in and see if we're the practice for you by offering a complimentary meet and greet. So the short answer is that we don't want you to quote prices over the phone because you're really not in a position to diagnose dentistry. Even the dentist can't do that. But we also don't want you to say we don't quote prices over the phone, because then you're entering into an adversarial relationship with the caller.
Okay, thank you, Danny. Next question is, on our machine we say when we will reopen. Is that okay? I think they mean on their voicemail.
Yeah, on their outgoing message. Oh yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, again, if you can keep it short and you're enthusiastic and you have a tagline and you invite them to visit your website. I went over that kind of quickly, but that's a really nice service for someone. And, you know, you say, or you can visit our website, and with hope your website address is a short, easy one to recite, where you can request an appointment for your convenience. You know, you can leave a message or visit our website. But I think saying when you'd reopen is fine, sure.
Okay. Next question is, we process insurance but expect payment at time of service. Then the insurance company sends a check to the patient.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond if the caller asks if we take their insurance?
Right. I would respond with the first part of that and saying we happily process all paperwork. We have a benefits coordinator on the team whose job it is to make sure that you receive all the benefits to which you're entitled. And you could even take it a step further and say, you know, we could even do a confirmation of eligibility or benefits. Do you have your card with you? And then you get the card, you get the information. Say, I'll submit this to Mary. So let me, you know, we'll take care of that for you. Now, how is it we can help you today? You see, what you've done there is, and this goes counter to some coaching that you may have received in the past, where they tell you to avoid the question or in some ways say, well, you know, that's not really that important because you won't get most of your coverage, most of your treatment won't be covered by insurance. Anyway, let me tell you what a great practice we are. Essentially, that's like saying to the caller, well, I'm going to tell you how great our practice is, but while I'm doing that, please don't think about a pink elephant. In other words, they can't think about anything else. And so you definitely want to address it to their satisfaction. But I hope you'll agree that I've done that by saying, that's a great question. Obviously, that's important. Do you have your card with you, or your insurance information? And then you're helping them. You've answered their question, and you've taken that out of the way, and now you can get back to the real meat of the matter, which is finding out what they need and how you can help.
Okay. We have a follow-up question to that, actually. It says, are you saying when people call for services, a dental practice should give a complimentary first visit? Because where I work, our first new patient appointment is a comprehensive oral exam, and it is $220 without insurance.
Yes, I am. And I'll tell you why. Because that is worth its weight. It's worth more than that to have an opportunity to meet with a prospective patient. And this is a tough pill for some people to swallow, especially if we're focusing on the clinkers, as Bill Rossi says, or the 5% exceptions. You know, for every 100 people that you offer a complimentary exam, is everyone going to wind up proceeding on to treatment? No, they won't. But just like companies make a lot of money on extended warranties, you might have noticed lately that you can't buy anything. You can't buy a pack of gum without someone trying to sell you an extended warranty. The reason is that they've done the math. And they say that for every warranty we sell, there's only a very small number of people that actually act on that warranty. In like fashion, for every comprehensive examination we give away, which is really just an opportunity to connect with someone and to diagnose treatment anyway, 5% are never going to come back. But what about the 95% who do? And maybe the 50% who came in who otherwise wouldn't have if you insisted that they pay for that examination.
Okay. We've gotten a lot of questions about, something like, what is your response to someone that they have dental insurance, but either they're out of network or they don't participate in that insurance?
Yeah, I think I covered that, actually. Now, because out of network, that's verbiage that the insurance company has. See, to win an argument or to control any debate, it's important that you create the vocabulary and you control the vocabulary. And that's why dental practices are placed at a disadvantage, because the insurance companies have successfully done that. They've come up with terms like usual and customary and out of network. That serves their purpose, not yours. In other words, I think we've covered enough on that. I just want to make sure we get to other people's calls. The important thing is that you control the dialogue. You don't have to use terms. For instance, when somebody calls and says, I just got a flyer, what is this about? I wouldn't recommend that you use the word flyer. I would say use complimentary invitation or new patient welcome. Okay? So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you can say we're out of network, but I think if you say you process the paperwork, now let me make sure. If you do not accept, if someone says, do you accept public aid? I don't want you to ignore that question. All right? You need to be honest, but you definitely want to speak to their needs. In fact, if you're a new telephone, if you're adopting this technology now for the first time, somebody asks you if you're on public aid, your goal should be to make that person sorry that they can't come into the office. In other words, don't say, no, I'm sorry, we can't help you. You go through the taffy introduction. I can help you with that, because you can. You see, even if you're not on don't accept public aid, you probably know somebody who does accept it, right? So you can help them. Go through the conversation, make them excited about your practice, but sorry that they cannot present, that they choose not to come in because they sincerely can't afford it, or as you all know, it may just not be of value to them, because people sometimes just don't value dentistry as they should. But remember, people's situations change, and people have friends who may not be on public aid. Wouldn't you like them to be an ambassador for you? I talked to this wonderful office, and they don't accept public aid, but boy, if you ever need help, I would suggest that you go to them.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question, Danny. How do you handle divorced couples arguing statements or a bill?
Wonderful. Well, say that again.
How do you handle divorced couples who are arguing over a statement or bill?
Well, I guess since I'm a mediator, this is not an unreasonable question to be asking me. I thought you were joking at first. Divorced couples arguing over a statement. Well, an effective mediation requires an impartial observer, a safe environment, and an agreement to rules, to what the ground rules are. But I've never been asked that before. It's a challenging question. So I guess I need to understand more. Are you saying, well, the divorced couple wouldn't be in the office together, so one of the divorced parties would be calling and saying, I don't owe for this, and the other one was saying, I don't owe for this? I suppose that's what they mean.
Yeah, I guess.
I'd have to think about it. I guess, you know what the answer is, though? The answer is, if you have a relationship with those people, you appeal to them and say, we're so sorry that happened. You seem like such a nice couple. And we're sorry that one or both of you are going to be leaving our practice. How do you suggest we resolve this? Again, it depends on what's preceded it. A lot of people ask me questions about, like, well, I want to know how to handle the insurance question. You know, what's a script? What's the magic bullet? And what people need to understand, and I think you do now, having gone through this, is simply that it's what precedes, it's what the relationship entails that determines what you are able and ought to say at any given point. And that's why it's not just knowing what to say, but when and how that's so important. I wish I could give a more definitive answer to that one, but I can't.
Okay. Well, Danny, I want to thank you very much on behalf of Lighthouse 360. We're very proud to have you do this webinar for us today. This wraps up the webcast, and I wanted to thank everyone out there who took the time out of your busy schedule to attend our webcast. If you want to learn more about Lighthouse 360, you can visit our website at www.lh360.com. Thanks, Danny.
It's my pleasure, Jason. Thank you. To thank everyone at Lighthouse 360, and most of all, thank you, attendees, for your time. I hope you found it valuable. Thanks again.